It's a city that's hosted all sorts of parties.
But it's never seen anything like this.
We're really excited, and we cannot wait to showcase Milwaukee to the world.
50,000 people are coming to town.
That's a great bump to the economy, obviously.
Those who aren't coming will be watching.
We have a chance to showcase Milwaukee.
History will be made.
We have an opportunity, all of us do, to help Milwaukee to shine.
And we're making sure you're ready.
This is Conventional Wisdom. Welcome to Conventional Wisdom, the podcast created to get you ready for Milwaukee's turn in the spotlight. And that moment, it's quickly approaching.
It is coming quick, is it not? And we really debated doing this entire podcast in several different accents just to show what a global event Milwaukee is hosting. And then we quickly realized that could go sideways so quickly.
Yeah, no.
So we will stick with my Midwestern accent and your slightly tinge of Philly accent.
It comes out every once in a
while.
while.
It does
that
indeed.
water. Well, Conventional Wisdom, of course, we are going international today, and we are so excited about it. Media from all over the world will be here in Milwaukee in July to cover the Republican National Convention, which is why this episode is called The World is Watching. And today we welcome Annelise Nielsen, the Washington correspondent for Sky News Australia.
In a few moments, we'll speak with Caitriona Perry of BBC, but let's start with you, Annelise. This will be kind of a mulligan for you because you were supposed to come to Milwaukee for the 2020 DNC. The pandemic put a kibosh on that, but they still sent you here anyway. What did you report on?
Well, look, I did get to talk to a lot of people, but yeah, this one's going to be a lot more fun, I'm hoping. That one, the entire downtown was still shut down for the convention because they were worried about protests, and it was really just me out there at the fence doing live shots. But I did get to talk to people around town, and that's a big focus for our coverage when we do this, is we want to go talk to real people, real voters about what they care about. And it's a really good way to find out where things are going, because I don't think anyone really knows how this election is going to end up.
It was an American politician who once said, "May you live in interesting times." No one can say we're not. How do you possibly prepare for a convention in which we really don't know what's going to happen? As we record this, there is a slight, very small possibility that the nominee may be behind bars. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think anyone in this conversation does, but it's a possibility that persists. This is an unconventional convention. How do you prepare for it?
Oh, yeah. We're lucky with our corporate structure. So we're working through Fox. I'm at the Fox Bureau now. And so we get that kind of assistance and access that other foreign broadcasters might not get. But for us, I think it's very much been we need to be in the room for this, because this is going to be a convention unlike any other. And from the international perspective, the world is watching. And this is just extraordinary to watch from that kind of outsider perspective. And these are the questions I get all the time is this really going to happen? Is Trump really going to be in jail? And the fact that we can't say definitively no is extraordinary. The fact we can't say absolutely not. And so this is why we're all watching so closely, and we're going to find out who the VP is. And depending on how this whole election goes, he could have, I guess, presuming now there's not, I think Elise Stefanik's the only woman who's still got her name in the mix, but could have a really important constitutional role if we come to, if we have a tight electoral college result and we're talking about Congress appointing the president next January, which is another possibility. There's just so many unknowns in this. We just knew we had to be there.
I appreciate you using our title of the episode within the conversation right there, saying that the world is watching, because that is absolutely the case. From your international lens, Annelise, what is your take personally, because you've been in news for a very long time, you've been doing this for a long time, you've obviously covered other U.S. presidential elections. What is your take on our race this year from an international lens? What do the people of Australia think when they're watching all of this happen on our soil?
It's a funny thing. I get asked this by Americans all the time, where they say, do people outside of America really care about our politics so much? Because we do such in-depth political stories in America. And the answer is always absolutely yes, because everything that happens here impacts the rest of the world. And for Australia, we're such close allies. For us, it's a huge foreign policy reset, potentially. If we go back to the Trump years, we've had a good few years under Joe Biden with the relationship there and the AUKUS nuclear submarine deal coming through. But by the same token, we watched the withdrawal from Afghanistan. That was pretty horrifying for a lot of Australians, watching how that all played out after we were the allies in there. We've been with America in every major conflict since World War II. And so we know if America is having trouble abroad, we're going to be right there with them. So this is something people talk about. It is something people care about. And I think for a lot of people overseas, they haven't quite twigged yet. This is really it, that the whole process has gone through and this really is a Trump-Biden rematch. And I think when they watch the convention, that's going to be the first time that it really hits home that these are the two choices come November.
Does Australia pay this close attention to other races in other countries that you are obviously allies with?
Look, no, it's really fascinating because people often think, oh, you must pay this much attention to the United Kingdom, given we're part of the Commonwealth, and we just don't. And I think the only other foreign country that would have as much impact on us domestically would be China, because they're our biggest trading partner, because we've kind of lived and died by them economically for so long. But for America, we look to the US for cultural leadership. There is that kind of sense that we have so many values in common. And for a lot of Australians, the dream is to come to America. You see a lot of our celebrities doing really well here in the arts and that kind of thing. And so I think people do pay attention to America more, but also just the theatre of how you run your election. This doesn't exist in Australia. The idea that I mean, even lawn signs for politicians is kind of a newer phenomenon in Australia, that you'd even tell people who you're voting for. And in America, you have rallies. Something like a Trump rally would never happen in Australia. No one likes any of our politicians that much.
Well,
so yeah.
Yeah, I want to get to that point. First of all, you mentioned your celebrities that you sent here. Thank you for Keith Urban, one of the best concerts I've ever seen. We had a delegate on one of the shows we did earlier on where the delegates were coming. And one of them, who is a Trump supporter, said on this show, look, first and foremost, he's an entertainer. How much of that is piquing the curiosity of Aussies watching? I mean, you're watching from afar, and there is a spectacle to all this, and he does know how to put on a show. That's part of the reason he might wait until day one, day two, to announce his VP candidate. How much of this is entertainment to Aussies, and how much of this is policy?
Well, I mean, they're one and the same, and I think people are just fascinated by it. And I think the other thing to keep in context is we have compulsory voting in Australia, so everyone has to vote. If you don't vote in Australia, you get fined. It's usually a pretty small fine, something like $20 to $80, but it's a fine nonetheless, and everyone has to be registered. So we don't have this thing where Americans have to get excited about something or really angry about something to go vote. And so this is why you have so much emphasis put in here about, we got to get you excited to go to the polling booth, or you're just not going to be bothered. Because in Australia, you have to, and people do. I think even without the fines, people would take it seriously.
Okay, hold on a second. Stephanie and I just looked at each other.
Should we adopt this?
Did you know this about? I'm sorry, we got to go down this road. Is that for every election? Is it for local elections, province elections, everything?
Yeah. Every election, your local council, so they do the classic is roads, rates, and rubbish. So they take care of your rubbish collection, your trash collection. You have to vote for the local council, and if you don't vote, you get I've had to pay the fine before because I've missed it.
I kind of like that, though, to be honest with you. I mean, you got to do your civic duty, and if you don't, well, pay up.
It's an interesting conversation for sure. I did not know that.
I didn't
I'm a
either.
little embarrassed I didn't know that, Annelise. Thank you. You're teaching us things right and left.
The Australia vote, because I think we're kind of the pioneers in that front. But keep in mind, we also have the population of Florida as our entire country, so it's a little easier to manage, and we don't have the same kind of state-by-state delineation that Americans have of different state governments having so much power over your federalists.
We could probably clear our national debt, though, if we did that,
Probably, a little bit.
Just starting with the fining. Let's talk.
Take a little more, yeah.
Yeah, right. Let's talk logistics for a second. So you're obviously coming here. You're obviously coming here with a group of people, I'm assuming, in terms of photographers and producers, perhaps. Can you just kind of give us a lay of the land in terms of when you're arriving? How big is your party that you're coming with? Do you know where you're staying at this point? Do you guys have your spot either inside Fiserv Forum or another location, maybe at the Baird Center? Logistically, do you know all the details yet?
And don't give the name of your hotel.
You don't have to, yes. You can say yes or no.
I don't know the hotel. They have booked it. This stuff all had to be booked so far out.
Sure.
Like we're talking months ago, it already had to be booked. And it's been a bit harder getting in for the actual spot in Pfizer Stadium, but we are in with Fox. They have a footprint by the stage, and we're part of that allocation. So it is a pretty lean machine. It's going to be me. We have our photographer, and I'll be joined as well by Joe Hockey. So he's the former Australian ambassador to the United States. He used to play golf with Donald Trump. He's now stayed on as a consultant with Bondi Partners in the United States. And so he's a great insight into different aspects of the Australia-US relationship, and knows quite a few of the people that are on the ground. And so that's it for us. And so it's just going to be a lot of long days for me.
Because you're reporting to a country whose capital is 15 hours ahead. Canberra is 15 hours ahead of Milwaukee in Central Time. So you're going to be reporting to sort of the early afternoon. Are you going to be reporting live or to the morning shows or the evening shows, or they put you all over wherever you're needed for that week?
Live and all over. So
yeah.
Sorry, that was my alarm going off before, because that's 4:30 a.m. in Australia. So that's when I have to call to check in with the chief of staff. So that's literally the first person who's awake in the office for me to talk to in the mornings. And so it goes just all evening and then into the mornings. And so this job's definitely turned me into a bit of a night owl.
I mean, I have to imagine, right? What is your goal, I guess, when you're doing kind of the prep work behind the scenes, when you're having your discussions with the former ambassador? What is your goal in terms of serving your viewers come this RNC?
It's a really good question, because you do have to think about it when you've got every man and his dog doing the same thing. What can you do that's different? And I think the things that are really important for us to do is explain what's different for an Australian audience, explain what the American system is like, because it is so different. And then just put everything in context, because there is so much polarized news coverage in America. It's really hard to know what's being spun and what is the bottom line. And it's a hard thing to do when you're also trying to put things in perspective with analysis to say, this is really important and this isn't important and this is why this matters. You have to really separate out the opinion, but you have to do that analysis as well. And so this is where I think sometimes coverage can fall short if you just stick to the who, what, where, why, when. It's really easy to do the logistics coverage, but to do that why is the hard part. To say why this matters, why these players are doing these certain things, what they're hoping to achieve. And that's when you can get criticized for going into more opinion. And so I think that's the really fine line I always try to walk. And especially for a foreign audience, though, just to explain, I mean, the convention, we don't have anything like conventions in Australia. I've covered our elections in Australia as well. It's a very different ball game for us. And so I think just trying to do the context is the important bit.
But having said that, you can come with a plan and it can get tossed like that because of the new. This is going to be a target-rich environment. There will be stories every day. And I think by design, I think Donald Trump is enough of a showman to know I'm going to make a wave on day 1 or 2 with my VP pick. Let that be the news cycle for a while. You can have a plan, but you also have to be prepared to be 24/7 breaking news for an entire week.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, we don't know where his legal cases are ending up too. I mean, we're just following what's been happening in Florida. But it looks like that's kind of collapsing on itself. But we just don't know. So yeah, absolutely, you're right. It's all about being reactive and just appreciating that we're dealing with unprecedented times. There's just so much that you can't do all this homework and research that knowing that it's going to be like last time, because the only thing we know is it's going to be completely different.
We're prepared to throw away all of our notes, too,
you're right.
when we're down there, for sure. We only have a couple of minutes left with you, Annelise, and we so appreciate you taking the time. I know it's in the middle of the night for you. You were here for a walkthrough of Pfizer Forum. I know, Ted, that's how you first hooked up with Annelise, and you guys met each other there. What was your first impression? And I know you were here for the DNC, but again, 2020, completely different world. I mean, it was a completely different world for all of us who live here. But what was your first impression when you were here this go around, when there were a lot of people and you got to see the space of Pfizer Forum that didn't exist back then? You know, what was your biggest takeaway?
Well, the good news is I'm in DC, so it's not the middle of the night. But I appreciate that.
Okay.
It's the middle of the night for my colleagues. My first impression was, oh my gosh, this is big. This is going to be really big. And just walking between all the buildings and seeing everything that's been set up and how many people they're anticipating will come here. And I also was just so happy. I know we were talking about this before. I have relatives in Wisconsin. My dad's from Chicago. It is so nice to see the Midwest on the world stage, because for me, this is a big part of what I do in my job as well, is try and get out of the big cities and get into the Midwest, the middle of America, where life really happens for most people, and show our viewers that this is where America comes from. This is where the big changes happen, because these are the voters that really matter. And so to see Milwaukee kind of have such a big world stage, I made me a little bit proud. I liked that.
Well, I could hear a little bit of Sheboygan in your accent there, mixed in with the Aussie. Listen, speaking of Milwaukee, when you talk to folks back in Australia, they go, where is this being held again? How do you explain that we are a major significant city, or do you have to? Do they know us there?
You'd be surprised. A lot of Australians are very into sport. So that is, I'm not very sports literate, but you'll be surprised how many know because of like Green Bay Packers and that kind of thing. But for the most part, it is trying to explain like, hey, this is where basically Hillary Clinton lost the election in 2016. If she'd just gone to Wisconsin, this would have been a very different ball game. And so it is just kind of always putting that in context and saying, like, look, we do those trips. I've been all around Wisconsin doing stories, talking to voters who changed their allegiance, that they used to vote Democrat and now vote Republican because they feel like Trump represents workers more than their local union chapter might when they tell them to vote Democrat. So these are all the real stories that change votes, and these are the real counties that flip states that flip that electoral college vote. And so sometimes you do have to go really specific to tell the big broad picture.
I got that. Good. That's wonderful. Andrew Bogut, by the way, former Bucks first round pick, was an Australian. We end every interview, as you probably end every interview. Is there something we haven't asked you that you think is important to your coverage of the RNC in Milwaukee?
No, I think that was a pretty comprehensive chat. I'm just trying to think.
That's what we aim for here. Comprehensive chats.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I do always ask that question, though.
I'm glad to know that you're not going to be jet lagged when you come out here, because you're only an hour ahead of us. I was thinking you were out in Australia. Yeah, I think it's the accent, I got like all wrapped up in it. I think it's so cool.
Background too, so.
Yeah, no, I love it. Well, hopefully we get a chance to chat with you when you are here for the RNC. We're going to be having our Conventional Wisdom podcast down there every single day at 2:30 during the week of the RNC inside Fiserv Forum. So hopefully our paths cross again, because we'd love to have you on.
And very much, we definitely owe you a beer or two.
Without a doubt.
Yes, so we'll blow the froth off a couple.
I'll bring my cheese head.
Okay. No, we have plenty of those. You don't have to bring
play
it.
the part.
Yeah, we're good. Annelise, we're going to let you go. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for the insight. We learned so much.
Oh, thank you. That's great. That's my job, so it's good to hear.
All right, cheers. Our next guest, Caitriona Perry, is an Irish journalist living in Washington and the chief anchor for BBC News. So she covers a lot of ground, and she's also an author of a book called In America, Tales from Trump Country, which came out in 2017 after she went out searching for the rise in Donald Trump and how it happened and how his first presidency came to be. And we welcome her to the podcast.
Which makes Caitriona a perfect guest for us as we go international on today's episode, The World is Watching. So Caitriona, let's start. This is going to be, your second time in Milwaukee when you come here in July?
I've been there a few times, actually. It's my second time this year. Yeah, I was at the Republican debate there last summer, met you, Steph, in those very hot, sticky conditions. But I've been to Milwaukee and around Wisconsin a couple of times before, 2016, 2017, 2018. So I love Wisconsin. It's quite like Ireland, big into dairy farming, big love of cheese and butter, which I also have. I'm looking forward to getting some more cheese curds.
Don't forget the beer.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there anything you're leaving out of that equation there? Caitriona, let me ask you this. You studied the rise of popularity of Donald Trump in your book. What is different this time around? He's still very popular with the Republican Party. He is obviously going to be the nominee. Is there any difference between his rise to popularity and his return to popularity?
Well, for me, Ted, this year feels quite deja vu of 2016. I mean, obviously we had 2020 in the meantime, but that was during COVID and the world was a different place. The campaigns were different. So much was done on Zoom, as we remember. But from what I've been hearing from voters traveling around your own lovely Wisconsin and neighboring states there, and those battleground states that are really going to be the ones that decide this election, voters are saying to me the same things they said to me in 2016, where yes, immigration is an issue, but the economy is a massive issue. You know, we all know how expensive groceries are, fuel is, living in this country. And it seems to me that Donald Trump is addressing those issues for people in a way that, although the US economy is doing so well and Joe Biden has done so well with it, he doesn't get any credit for that. But Donald Trump is connecting with people in the same way that he did in 2016 in terms of understanding or at least communicating or saying that he understands the pain that they're going through, the struggles that they're going through, those decisions about, do I put gas in my car or do I put food on my table? Can I have a holiday? Can I get a new house? Can I buy new clothes? All of these things that, you know, people are really struggling in the same way that they were back in 2016. It feels very similar to me.
You're the chief anchor for the BBC. Obviously, you're based in Washington, D.C. But I'll ask the same question that I asked Annelise. For your viewers who watch the BBC, how much does American politics play a role in that? Are people outside of our country very much focused on this presidential race?
Many people are obsessed with this presidential race outside of the US, I would say. You know, America is such a strong and powerful country, and what happens here feeds into so much of what happens in the rest of the world. I mean, we only need to look at the situation in the Middle East, for example, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, you know, the last few days with the G7 summit and NATO and the D-Day commemorations. The US feeds into security all around the world, Europe and many other places. So what happens here and who's in power here has an indirect and sometimes direct impact on the lives of so many other people around the world. And what's kind of extraordinary about this year is that everybody knows what a President Joe Biden looks like. Everybody knows what a President Donald Trump looks like. So these characters are so well known to almost everyone on earth at this point in time that the interest level is just really, really huge.
Many years ago, I was a student in London and spent 4 months there and was amazed at how much the Brits knew about American politics and conversely, how little we know. Mm-hmm. I think if you asked 100 Americans who the Prime Minister of Great Britain is, I'm guessing less than 10 will get it right, and maybe 25 to 30 would be able to name a single prime minister outside of Churchill, perhaps. So there is the policy issue to all this, Caitriona, but is there also a sport to it all? Politics is in many ways entertainment. Donald Trump, as delegates have said about him on this show, he is an entertainer. How much of this is just the fascination with what a character, for lack of better words, he is?
A lot of it is, Ted, probably. I mean, just how long campaigns go in this country is very interesting to those of us who aren't American. In Ireland, campaigns last about a month, maybe 6 weeks. At the moment, there's a UK election season underway. They will be picking a new parliament, a new prime minister. That's a 6-week run-in. Here, it's, 18 months, possibly 4 years, really, that people are talking about who's going to be the president, who's going to be in the White House. So when you're talking sport and entertainment, there's a lot to look at. There's a lot to consume there between the primaries, all the various debates and so on, and the various machinations of that. And this year in particular, I mean, Donald Trump, we know he knows how to run a good show. He's a long history working in television. And, we have basically veep stakes, right? Like we have to wait to the convention for the grand reveal as to who's going to be his vice presidential candidate. And, I think he's going to marshal that in a really probably interesting way during those few days of the convention and keep everyone guessing. All the various personalities who are in the running will be around Milwaukee, probably giving speeches, and kind of keep that moment of suspense up until he reveals who it is that's going to be on the ticket with him.
It'll be like the ultimate version of The Apprentice in many ways.
In
Absolutely.
some ways.
I mean, is he going to have 3 people on stage on the final night and kind of say, you're fired, you're fired, you're hired? I mean, who knows?
That would be an interesting way to do it. I mean, it's intentional, right? Like he is a showman through and through. We've known that, ever since his first run up to 2016. So the fact that he's going to be announcing his VP, his campaign is adamant of doing so here at the RNC, which hasn't been done in, 60 years, really. You know, he's doing that with intention. When you come here from DC, what sort of caravan are you traveling with in terms of the personnel you're bringing in? When are you coming to town? Do you know those details yet?
Yeah, sure. We're actually traveling in a big group this time to the RNC. The BBC has done a major expansion into the US just in the last year, because basically the BBC is one of the most trusted news brands in the US, according to the latest Reuters Institute survey, and people are looking for something different to, you know, much of the media is polarized, I guess, in this country. The BBC is impartial and objective, and we cover everything and everyone in a neutral way. And we also cover a lot of international and foreign news. So in order to kind of make the best of that expansion, I'll be hosting like 4 shows a day from the RNC, from inside the convention center there. We have a lot of reporters coming with us who'll be inside and around, getting that color and all the characters, and the delegates who'll be heading into Milwaukee as well. We have a big digital team as well who'll be writing up stories for our website and for our app also. So we're kind of arriving in a scaled basis. I'll get in just a day or two before, but some of our advanced team will be here a week or two before. We've got a big engineering rig out coming from the UK. We'll be building kind of like a mini studio in one of the skyboxes there inside. And, you know, as I said, there's massive global interest to this. The BBC is headquartered in the UK, but we are a global news channel. So we broadcast right around the world. And so many people have an interest in what happens. It's so important what happens, that we want to deliver to our audiences and give them as much coverage as we can.
When you tell people the convention is in Milwaukee, what is the international reaction to that? Do they know where we are? Do they know the importance of Wisconsin as a swing state? What do you tell them, and what is their impression of us, and why this is so important to us? What do you say to them?
I think when you say Milwaukee, people might say, "Oh, where's that?" Or they'll know the Milwaukee Bucks if they're into watching basketball. If you say Wisconsin, people have a better idea of where Wisconsin is because it's a swing state, battleground state. That's one of the state names that they're hearing a lot of times, and they know the value of that kind of place within the American political system as well. And it's really just a fascination with how the whole system runs here, the concept of the convention, the concept of the delegates coming from all over into one city, the pressure that puts on, I guess, hotels and restaurants. And, you know, do the prices go up? You guys can tell me that. Are we going to be spending a fortune for the week?
Hopefully not. Less than Chicago, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, we're not cutting any deals, but it's not, you know, I don't think we're jacking anything up too much there.
What are you most excited about when you come here?
Really just meeting people, to be honest. Not being American myself, I absolutely adore getting out of Washington, D.C. and traveling around the country and, you know, seeing how different everyone is. You know, when you're outside of the US, then you hear statistics about how so few Americans have passports or, you know, leave the country. When you're from a small island or a smaller continent in Europe, you wonder, gosh, how is that possible? And then you come here and you see everything that America has to offer. You don't have to leave America to have a beach holiday, a ski holiday, taste different foods, see different architecture, speak a different language, talk to different kinds of people. So that's really fascinating for me as a non-American. And, you know, coming to Wisconsin, particularly because of its position as a battleground state, it's really interesting for me to talk to people there and try and get a sense of how they're feeling ahead of the election, whether they're leaning towards Biden, leaning towards Trump, how they're feeling about the direction that this country is going in. You know, and like I said, to taste the local food and drink of the city as well. It's a big part of the experience.
We'll be serving up plenty of that. You know, in your book, Tales from Trump Country, you did visit different battleground states, and you mentioned the battleground states, and there are 7 key ones. Put you on the spot here. Do you look at Wisconsin any differently than, say, Arizona or Nevada or Georgia? Is there something unique about our voters that you don't see in other states, or are we just one of 7 swing states in your eyes?
Oh, no. Wisconsin's very special, Dash. Of course it is.
Well said.
Oh, because they're special. Yeah, I mean, there are different issues at play, right? And those kind of more southern states have different issues than, say, you guys do, or Michigan or Pennsylvania. There's a different kind of economic makeup in many ways. People have different things motivating them. And I think the whole point of the battleground states is that they are different, and that you can't assume if you do well in one of them that ergo you'll do well in all of them. And plenty of campaigns have floundered based on that assumption. So it's very important to take each one as it is. And, Wisconsin obviously has a big agricultural part to the state, as we do in Ireland as well. So the voice of the farming community is really important. Impacts of climate change are visible there, as they are in some of the southern states, but in a different way. And so everyone has their different issues and the different things that motivates them when they decide who they're going to vote for.
When you get here, Ted and I are going to be inside Fiserv Forum. We're going to be kind of near the Fox News area. So I hope that we either make a trip up to your skybox or you make a trip down so that we can, meet and shake hands and talk again.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you guys can come on my show as well. Tell me all about Milwaukee.
Well, why don't you plug your podcast? Because I see over your, I guess it would be your right shoulder, I see your podcast there, The Global Story. Is that your podcast?
Yeah.
Tell us about that, because I have been listening. It's quite good.
Oh, great. Thanks, Ted. Yeah. So The Global Story is one of the BBC podcasts. It started just before Christmas, and it basically takes like one big story from around the world per episode. It's daily, Monday to Friday, and breaks that down. And I suppose the BBC is in a unique position in that we have journalists and bureaus in almost every country, so we can talk about big stories with the people who are on the ground experiencing it. Like when we did this week was on the floods in Brazil, so we were able to talk to our colleagues from the BBC Brazil service, who service the people of Brazil through Portuguese. So they were able to tell us on the ground what had happened in their home cities and their home states. So, kind of that's what we try and do, is do a deep dive on a story that maybe gets a big hit initially, and then the attention moves on to something else. And it's different every day. We do a lot of stuff from America, of course, particularly with all the various machinations of trials and whatnot that we've had in past weeks here. There's quite a lot of our episodes have focused on US politics and US happenings as well.
That's the beauty of podcasts. You can kind of dive deep in a much longer form than you can typically when you're on TV. After speaking with you, Caitriona, and speaking with Annelise a little bit earlier, I think we titled this episode appropriately. The world is watching, and you both have confirmed from different vantage points, her from Australia, you from the BBC and Ireland and everywhere else in between, the world is watching.
Before we let you go, is there anything we haven't asked you that you think is important from your perspective, from your viewers' perspective, from the BBC perspective, that you'll be looking at during this week in July?
I suppose how the people of Milwaukee view the convention and all the razzmatazz and the circus that's coming to town. Does that disrupt their lives, or is that something entertaining and important for them to watch and see?
A little of both.
I was going to say, I think it's a split decision depending on who you're talking to. I know that there's a lot of businesses downtown, especially the big corporations, that have said, you know what, stay home and work from home this week so that you're not disrupted and you're not frustrated by the crowds and the security and all that sort of stuff. But, of course, there's a lot of businesses that are like, bring it on. This is going to be a big boost to our bottom line. So it really depends on who you ask. And when it comes to who they're going to vote for president, the same could be said for that, too. So.
Caitriona Perry, BBC's chief anchor, and we should point out, no relation. We're both named Perry.
I think that's a good thing to point out.
We followed each other on Twitter years ago because of our last names and our profession, and we have talked, we have had dinner, and I consider you a friend, but we should point out, in case anyone's wondering, we are not related, right?
No Nepo babies here, yeah.
No Nepo babies here. You are a pleasure and a joy to talk to, and we appreciate your insight, and the first round of cheese curds is on us.
Oh, great. I'll see you guys soon.
Love it. All right. The world is watching. This episode is now officially done. We'll see you next time.